Okay, working with CAS. We're going to learn what CAS means today. It's another math acronym that you're going to learn about, kind of like SOHCAHTOA or all those little things, right, that kind of help you figure things out. So let's look at quadrant 1. Okay, start with quadrant 1. In quadrant 1, when you have a coordinate, say you have a point x, y, so x, y, and r. What do we know about the signs of all three of those? Will x be positive in quadrant 1? Yes. Will y be positive? Yes. And will r be positive? Yes. They're all going to be positive, right? So you're going to have, for sine, the formula is y over r. Cos is going to be x over r. And tan is going to be y over x. And they're all positive values. So when you have a positive divided by a positive, that will make a positive value, okay? Meaning the ratio will be greater than 0. For sine, cos, and tan, they're all going to be positive values. Okay, so quadrant 1 is going to be the A in CAST, and it stands for all. All ratios are positive in quadrant 1. Doesn't matter about the ratio you're looking at, they're all positive. That's what the A stands for. Can you guess what the C, S, and T might stand for? Cosine and tan, maybe? Who knows? Let's find out. Okay, let's go to quadrant 2. So when you're in quadrant 2, and we have a point, okay, R is always positive. X, positive or negative? It's going to be a negative, and Y is going to be positive. So sine will be Y over R, which are both positive values. So if they're both positive, the ratio would also be greater than 0, or positive. Cos is negative, or x over r. In this case, it'll be a negative x over r, or a negative over a positive. So if you have a negative divided by a positive, less than 0, negative. It's negative. Cosine will be negative always. The ratio will always be negative in quadrant 2. And then tan is y over the x, which is a negative value. So positive over a negative, less than 0, negative. So the only one that's positive in the second quadrant is sine. So in the second quadrant, sine is positive. So when we're talking about, what's important is if we know what's positive, then we know what's negative. So if sine is the only one that's positive, then obviously cos and tan are negative. Okay, in quadrant 2. We're going to do the same thing for quadrant 3 and 4. What do you know about 3 and 4 about sines? X is negative and y is negative. What about r? Positive. Okay, so sine, negative y over r, it's going to become a negative over a positive is less than 0. Okay, finish off these two. Okay, so x, you should have had negative x over r, so it would be less than 0 or greater than 0? Less than 0, they're negatives. And tan, y over x, what will happen? Positive, because when we have two negatives being divided, turns into a positive. Interesting. All right, and last, so I'm just going to draw a little thing here. So in quadrant 3, the only one that's positive is tan. Tan is positive. Maybe I'll write tan is positive up here. We had sine is positive. Here they were all positive. Okay, last one. Who's positive, who's negative in quadrant 4? Oh, you're already ahead of the game. Okay, x is positive and y is negative. R is positive. So negative y over r makes less than 0 or negative for sign. Cos is x over r, which is positive. They're both positive values. And tan, negative y over x. Oops. So that would be negative. Oh, yeah, negative. So which, in quadrant 4, who's positive? Just cos. Cosine is positive. The cos ratio is positive. And so that's where we get cast. So cast, we start at the fourth quadrant and CAST. Okay, so it's going to help us figure out who's positive, which ratios are positive, and which quadrants. So notice they're all positive in quadrant 1. So because they're all positive in quadrant 1, the cosine ratio, let's say cosine. Cosine is positive in both quadrant 1, the quadrant where all of them are positive, and quadrant 4. They're all going to have 2. 1 and their other one, their corresponding one. Okay? And so we're going to use this thing called CAST, C-A-S-T, to help us figure out if we're given a ratio, the angle has 2 possibilities. Okay? Depending on if it's positive or negative. It's going to be, there's 2 solutions that'll give that exact same ratio. Okay, and we're going to look at some examples like that. What was I going to say? Say something. Well, let's just get into it. Let's go to the next page. Oh, the CAST rule, some people also do add sugar to coffee. AST, so starting in quadrant 1 and going counterclockwise, ASTC, add sugar to coffee. That works too. Okay, CAST. Because when you do with CAST, you have to start in quadrant 4, which is kind of awkward. So if you want to start in quadrant 1 and go around, add sugar to coffee. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to state whether the ratio is going to be a positive or negative using CAST, and then we're going to check our answers with our calculator. Okay, so 35 degrees is in what quadrant? Quadrant 1. And so if it's in quadrant 1, will cosine ratio be positive? Yes, because they're all positive. All of sine, cos, and tan are positive. So yes, it's going to be positive. Let's check. Type in cos 35 into your calculator. So type in cos of 35 degrees. Is that a positive number? Sure is. Okay, that's right. 124 degrees. What quadrant is that in? Quadrant 2. So C-A-S-T. Will tan be positive in quadrant 2? No. Only who is positive? Sine. Only sine's positive. So therefore, tan 124 should give us a negative ratio. So let's type that in and check. Oops, wrong one. That's not what I wanted. Let's try this again. Tan 124. And it's a negative. We're correct. 95 degrees. What quadrant is 95 degrees in? It's actually in quadrant 2. So C-A-S-T. Will it be positive or negative? Because we're dealing with sine. Anybody? Positive. Because in quadrant 2, sine is positive. And we're dealing with a sine ratio. So let's type double check. Sine 95, positive. Okay, 230. What quadrant is 230 in? 1, 2, 3, or 4? Remember, this is 270 and this is 180. 90 and 0. So quadrant 3. 230 would be around there. Using CAST, C-A-S-T. Is sine positive or negative in quadrant 3? Negative. Only tan is positive because that's the letter T, meaning sine would be a negative value. So if you type in sine 230, does it give you a negative? If you're in the right mode, it does. Okay. Okay, where's 300 going to be? Quadrant what? 4. CAST will be positive or negative? Negative. Only cosine is positive, so tan would be negative. You have to look at which ratio we're looking at. Okay, try the other two. You do the last two. 100 and 123. They're both here. Okay, cosine of 100 degrees, positive or negative? Negative. And sine of 123, it's an S, so then positive. Show cos 4 over 5 in center position has two possible solutions and determine those angles. So when we're looking for an angle, we actually have two possible solutions, always between 0 and 360. Okay? And this is where cast is going to come in. Okay, so if we think of cast, and we look at the ratio we have, cos 4 over 5. Is that ratio a positive or a negative? Cos 4 over 5. Is that positive or negative? Positive, okay? So this is a positive ratio. So using cast, where is cosine positive? What quadrants? 4 and also 1, right? So that means that our solution, cos is positive in both quadrant 1 and 4. I'll zoom in a bit. Positive both in 1 and 4. So we need to find the solutions for both. Okay? So when we're looking for the solution, what we want to do is always find our reference angle first. So now that we know it's in quadrant 1, that's our first step is to figure out, okay, what quadrants are my angles going to be in? The second is we're going to find our reference angle. So if we find our reference angle for those two quadrants, we can figure out those two angles. Now, one is easy because we know that the reference angle will be the same as our rotation. And we'll have to do a little bit of math for quadrant 4. So we want to find the reference angle. So how do I do that? Well, how do we find an angle back in Math 10C when you had the ratio? Inverse, yeah, we use the inverse button. Now, it's really important. Remember that a reference angle is always less than 90 degrees. It's an acute angle. And so if your ratio is negative in the question, always type in the positive ratio. Because we're looking for the reference angle. We're looking for the acute angle. Not the first. Otherwise, it might give you the first solution, but there's two solutions. So we want to find the reference angle. So I'm actually going to write a little r here because we're looking for the reference angle. We'll go to nearest degree. So inverse cos, second cos, 4 divided by 5. And that gives you 30 to the nearest degree, 37 degrees. That's our reference angle. Okay. So now that we know that the reference angle is 37, we can find the two solutions. In quadrant, so find both rotation angles. both thetas. So start with quadrant 1. If our reference angle is 37, what's the angle in quadrant 1? 37. Theta is 37 degrees. Remember the reference angle and rotation angle are the same in quadrant 1? Quadrant 4. That's not good. How do we get, if this is 37 degrees and this is 37 degrees, how do I get the full rotation angle? 360 minus 37, which gives you 323. Okay, so those are our two solutions. Between 0 and 360, there's two angles that are going to give you that same positive ratio of 4 over 5. I'm going to show you how to check your work. Okay, in a second. What is 4 over 5 equal to, by the way? As a decimal, 4/5. 0.8, right? 8/10. 0.8. So when we want to check our work, if I'm doing a check, I'm going to type in cos 37 degrees and cos 323 degrees. Now, did we round these angles? Yes, so it needs to be very close to 0.8, these ratios. So let's try them. Cos 37, is that approximately 0.8? Yes, that's approximately 0.8. And cos 323, is that approximately positive 0.8? Yeah. Okay, so there's our check. Those two angles will give you the same ratio of approximately 0.8. Okay? Two more examples and then we're done. So we're going to practice the same thing. Okay. If cos is equal to negative 2/3, between 0 and 360, determine the measure of theta to the nearest 10th. So, first step, where is positive or negative ratio we're dealing with? We're looking when is cos a negative ratio? C-A-S-T. Now remember, CAS tells us when they're positive, right? So where would cos be negative? S-T. S and T. So if it's positive in 1 and 4, it means it's negative in the other two, 2 and 3. Okay? So now we know our quadrants are going to be 2 and 3. That's our first step. What's our next step? Find the reference angle. So how would I get the reference angle? Inverse. Now, if our ratio is cos theta equals negative 2/3, if I want the reference, the acute angle, I'm going to go inverse of positive or negative. So I'm going to show you something. If I typed in the negative versus if I typed the positive. Okay, which one of these is your reference angle? The first or the second? The second, because a reference angle is less than 90. See, what the problem is if you put the negative in, it actually is going to give you the first solution, the first rotation angle. But we want to find two angles, so that's a problem. And that's why we find the reference angle first, so that we can find both solutions. So this will give you the first answer. So we should expect our first angle, our first solution, to be 131.8 degrees. But there's two answers. There's two places cos is negative, and that's why we always put in the positive. We always put in the positive to find the reference, because we want it to be an acute angle. We want the first quadrant. So then we can find the other two. And so that was to one decimal place, 48.2 degrees. Yeah. Okay. So now we can find the thetas. So first, quadrant 2. How do you get, if in quadrant 2, my reference is 48.2, how do I get the rotation angle? This angle. What, 180 minus 48.2, which gives us, surprise, surprise, the 131.8 that we saw earlier, that first solution. Okay. That's the quadrant 2 solution. Quadrant 3. So if it's in quadrant 3, this is not working. Here's my reference angle of 48.2. How do I get the rotation angle? 180 plus 48.2. Which gives us, we can probably do that, 228.2. So there's our two solutions. So between 0 and 360, there will always be two solutions. And so if you just put inverse of the negative, it gives you the first, not the second. You only get half the marks. We need both solutions. So we get our reference angle and then find them based on the reference angle. Okay. Could I check my work? How could I check my work? Okay, type in cos of my angle, and it should be equal to 131.8. What should it be equal to approximately? What do we expect it to be equal to? Negative 0.6 repeating, right? Negative 2/3 is the same thing as negative 0.6 repeating. So if we're checking our work, we type in our cos of 131.8 and cos of 228.2. They should both be approximately 0.6 repeating. Approximately. So, pretty close. And is it negative? Yeah, it's approximately negative 0.666. Good number. Cos of 228.2. So we expect it to be a negative, and we expect it to be approximately 0.666. And is it? Pretty close. Okay. So we're looking for not just is it close to that ratio, but the same sign. If you want to check your answer. Okay. I think that's it. Okay. That's the lesson. Short and sweet today. Lots of time to practice these 3 steps. Okay. So just another side note, if the question is asking for theta, they're specifically asking for the rotation angle. The only time a question asks for a reference angle is if they specifically say reference angle. So theta always stands for the whole rotation angle, okay? That's what it is. So assignment is on the board. It's page, I'll write it down here, 96 to 99. Numbers 4, 6, 7, 12, 13, and 15. And if you get a chance, try 16. And then around 11:40-ish, 11:43, I'm going to hand back your test. Okay? All right. Nice.